You're listening to the Devil Dog Talk Show.
This show contains explicit material and is recommended for ages 18 and older for mature audiences only. But hey, it's the internet.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Devil Doc Talk Show. Today I'm excited to bring David Green, and we were just learning a lot about podcasting and of course audio engineering equipment, computers, and all that fun stuff. But we're really here to talk more about his book, The Company You Keep. So thank you, David. Thank you for coming on today. Thank you for spending the time with us and our audience. I'm really excited to introduce you to them.
Thank you, sir. Great to meet you.
All right, so today we're going to be jumping into David's bit of history, kind of a background, let's discover who are we talking to, right, group? Well, David, how did you, of course, we know, okay, David did serve in the military. Look at the background, folks, okay? All right. How did you start your journey in the military?
Well, in high school, I intended to go to West Point. I'm from a small rural town in Hemlock, Michigan. Wonderful place to grow up. Until I was 18 years old, I did not travel 100 miles circumference from the epicenter where I was born. And now I've been to 4 continents, 50 countries all over. But until I was 18, I never traveled. The first trip I ever flew on was California to see my best friend who moved in the 10th grade from Hemlock to California in Santa Clara, actually Pleasanton, California. But I was all set to go to the military. I've always wanted to be a soldier. And this is crazy, and people may not understand it or throw shade on me, but there was a man who was very, very influential in the 80s. And I said, you know what? Instead of the military, I want to go to business school. And as crazy as it is, it was Donald Trump. That's when his Art of the Deal came out. I mean, he was all over the media. Both Republicans and Democrats loved this guy. And I was like, I want to change my stars. I want, instead of being everyone in my town either worked for General Motors or they were farmers. And that was a very respectable livelihood. And I thought that probably what I would end up, and I've been fine with that. But I just, kind of like Luke Skywalker, I saw something beyond that I wanted to try out. And so I applied to one university, Michigan State University, because my best friend, Tim Burley at the time, or still is my best friend for years and years, went there and applied to one school, never thought about applying for other schools. I didn't realize how competitive it is. I got in and started business school right away. Graduated business school, met the love of my life, still married to her 33 years later. And in 1996, we went to one of her high school friends was a Air Force captain, and he was working for a congressman in Michigan. So we went to DC, and we got the whole tour of everything that our great history and our great nation offers in that beautiful capital, which actually I'm going to tomorrow. For the weekend. And while we were there, we went to the 2 Men and a Soldier. And as romantic and as crazy as it sounds, I started weeping. It just moved me. And I was like, I was already a manager at IBM. So that was 1996. I already been in business for 3 years. My career was skyrocketing. And I was like, there's more to this. I want to serve my country pre 9/11. And I've always wanted to be a police officer. So my wife supported it. IBM supported it. They let me take leave of absence. I enlisted to be a military police soldier in the 18th Airborne Corps out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, because I worked in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. And from that moment on, I was hooked. And I was enlisted as an MP, and I realized pretty soon at 26 years old that, I already had 2 degrees. I already went to Michigan State, and I already graduated from Duke University. With a market management, more sociology, like what is leadership? What makes leaders work with institutions, with people? And at that point, I decided to be an officer candidate school. And Fort Bragg had a officer candidate school at Raleigh, North Carolina. And I went to that and really, really drank the Kool-Aid, decided to become an infantry officer, and was all into it. I already started law school at the time. I've just, I have like 6 degrees now. I don't know why, because I was not the student in high school, but for some reason, higher education just really resonates with me. So went to officer candidate school, became an infantry officer in the North Carolina National Guard. Absolutely. First of the 119th Infantry Battalion, Swamp Dragons. Absolutely loved it. While I was in law school, 9/11 hit, and that really moved me. And as of every soldier, of every person who's in the military, I mean, you train, to be in the fight, to serve your nation's interests. So I wanted to get to the front. I wanted to help any way I could. And everyone said, well, they didn't activate hardly any reserves or the National Guard in Desert Storm. If you really want to get in the fight, you should branch transfer from the infantry to the JAG Corps, because I already had a law degree at that point. And so I did, and got in pretty quick. I was in Iraq in 2004. And 20 years later, I'm still fighting the dang the same war after 8 combat tours. But at the time, but it was absolutely the best move for me, because I've worked for great companies. I've really only worked for IBM and Verizon my whole career, 30 years. I actually have a retirement for both of them, as crazy as that sounds. And they were super, super companies to work for, very, very supportive. Verizon has had a CEO who was a veteran in all our wars up until like recently. So they really, and in 9/11, their headquarters is 140 West Street. And in 9/11, their building has steel from the World Trade Center that's still embedded into their foundation that they couldn't remove. And it's still there. And they lost employees that day. And so they know what it means, because it's across the street from Ground Zero. And so they've always been super supportive. And so my career flourished in corporate America, did very well, went really high. And then every couple of years, I would get activated and, fight in the global war on terrorism, whether it was in Africa, 3 times in Afghanistan, 3 times in Iraq, or the Middle East, Uzbekistan, all kinds of crazy places. So that's what I am. And I'm still in. And then 2 weeks ago, I completed my 30th year. And I'm still in. I'm still, old soldiers just fade away. And I don't want to leave. So I'm going to keep in as long as I can. And I retired from Verizon in 2023, I believe, 2022, around that era. And the Army just keeps giving me great opportunities and challenges, and we'll go through all that. But I've done a lot of active duty the last 5 years or so.
That's amazing. That speaks true to the whole sense of service and honor, right? The main principles of serving one's nation, to come from such a background, right? Never even leaving the house, the 100-mile radius, for God's sake, right? And you're sitting there now looking back at it 30 years later, especially after the last 5 years, you work for these amazing organizations. And it came from not just this sense of, oh, I want to do something, I want to feel good about it. It's, hey, I have to, I'm building, right? Looking at the history, when 9/11 happened, it changed the world. And that's something that I think a lot of people seem to forget, is the meaning of what it was and the why behind our assertions to fight in the global war of terror. Now that's going from so many different lengths of when I was in 2004 to when I deployed 2006, right? And even before I got out in 2011, things changed dramatically within warfare and the parameters of what was seen as service. And I get it, more so for the civilian world, because let's be honest, we got fat and lazy, thinking that this was just a couple men in pajamas. This was just one nation doing this thing. And the deeper and deeper we've served, the deeper and deeper, I mean, for yourself, you've seen it, where it's so many different things coming into the view, creating the mechanisms that, yes, the ground troop on the ground, they're working, like for myself in Iraq or Afghanistan, Syria now, all these different places where the global war of terror has led us to performing our duties. It's difficult, I get it, it's something that's scary, but to then leverage your education and come out of it ahead, not just saying, hey, this is what I'm doing is active, but this is what I'm building for my career, right? Becoming a JAG, leaning into that truth, what people don't highlight. And I want to kind of go back to that a little bit, which is being the forward operating legal system for the United States military is usually never discussed, right? It's not this glamorous job, nobody's kicking a door in. For the most part, the main emphasis is to provide actionable intelligence, actionable results, and actionable insulation from the metrics that people again forget. Because war doesn't mean there's no rules. It just means that sometimes the persons in charge or the authorities sending us forget the rules and or push upon the rules a little too hard, where you're like, hey, we gotta kind of cut loose here. We're not gonna get that guy. How was that like for you serving at that capacity? Let's say we'll just pull two from your first deployment and rotation where you're like, hey, this is, this is new to me. This is where we're going from. And then secondly, from when you were wrapping up that service and when you were, forward in years, looking back going, wow, this is the bread and butter. This is the meat and potatoes of what people aren't talking about. How can we break that apart in your perspective a bit?
The first time I went to actual combat, I was in Kuwait. It's called CFLIC, Combined Forces Land Component Command. It's under the Third Army. And Fallujah, your Devil Doc, happened, and the Abu Ghraib prison stuff just came out. General Sanchez was the commander, and they were not going to put him in front of the Senate to become the multinational fourth Iraq commander, the 4-star. They took General Casey, who was already the second in the chief of staff. He's like the deputy chief of staff or whatever the title is, already a confirmed 4-star. They brought him in, and they put him in Iraq, in Baghdad. It got crazy. They were going to stand up this force. I was a first lieutenant. I mean, that's the lowest level in the JAG Corps you can be. And we're in this spectrum, and Dick Gordon, Colonel Gordon, who is a legend. He was in 10th Mountain during Somalia. Legend in the JAG Corps, the most respected JAGs you'll ever meet. And he basically said, hey, I need two JAGs to go forward. And I'm not disparaging anybody in the staff I was with, but he looked for volunteers, and there's 2 first lieutenants in the back who were reservists. Both raised their hand. And he goes, duly noted. That's what he said, duly noted. And the next day I got orders. I went to CJTF-7, and I'm like within a week, I'm in Baghdad at Camp Victory. And that day, Donald Rumsfeld and Negroponte was, I think, the ambassador or the CPI. And the first day I'm there, I hardly had any sleep. You're traveling, it's hot, it's all new to you. And Rumsfeld was there, so we started getting rocket attacks that night. So the first time I'm like, I'm very bizarre new world. And I remember it was just like the movies, like you see it. It's like Peanuts or Snoopy. You hear the wah 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 in the background, and bombs are going off, alarms going off. And I remember sitting in my cot. I'm in a tent, and I'm trying to put my boot on, and I'm like shaking, like your fine motor skills are gone. And I had a lieutenant commander, which is in the Navy, screaming at me to get into the bunker. He's in the tent, whatever, senior in charge. And so I'm like, I could barely hear him, didn't know what's going on. I was already in REM sleep, right, when the stuff started happening, like 3, 4 in the morning. So we get into a bunker, and he's in this concrete facility. He takes his 9mm and he locks and loaded. And I'm like, these are mortar rounds coming in. Like, what are you going to do with this 9mm? And I was like, okay, this is bizarre. Then the next day, I had an E7 that I went with, who's a dear friend of mine, retired E8, over 100 combat jumps with 82nd Airborne. And he was like, hey, Lieutenant, show up at this tent. I'm like, okay. So I didn't want to stay in that one tent with this crazy guy. I went to this one tent, and there's 10 cots in there, and everything was filled, with clothing and other things. So I dropped my stuff off and went back to the headquarters. And I was like, hey, Sergeant, there's like, he goes, oh no, just take like the 4th one. He goes, we act like people are there because KBR was the unit, and they lost control of everybody who was there. And so they would go through the tents and see who was in a place. So for the next 6 months, I stayed in a tent, 410, then only had 4 because we faked every cot that had someone in it. And that's when I knew the power of NCO. NCOs are like, they run the Army, they run the system, and they're really good at what they do. And I learned so much from it, but it was a fun joke. But later on, you would hear bombs go off and you're in your cot and you'd be like, that's 400 meters away. Like, it's like totally different. Like your whole mechanism. That's why I love it in the military, where we try to put us through immense training to replicate stressful situations, which is nowhere near potentially what it really is. But once you go through that, your body is different, right? It changes differently. So, I had 8 combat tours after that and engaged every time, even last year. And, you're not afraid of it. You just understand it and you can react differently. And that's what training does. And so went to that and then went, fast forward all the way to my last tour, which was at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. And when Iran was attacking us with intergalactic ballistic missiles, and the Iron Dome was over it and aircraft over it, and you can see the bombs going off and the sirens, and just totally different. And the key about being a JAG is your job is to help that commander get to yes, legally, ethically, morally, responsibly, fiscally, expeditiously. And sometimes it's no, or like, sir, ma'am, I know this is your intent, but what if you did this? You're a combat multiplier, but you don't make the call. You're there for advice. You're there for counsel. You're there to help them get to it. And there was thousands of hours, I would say, that I was spent in a JOC or, Joint Operations Center or a Tactical Operations Center. And they call it kill TV, which is absolutely true. You're in an amphitheater, whether it's 3 levels up, handmade by the Navy Seabees or anybody else. And there's TV monitors and you can hear everything. And you have that ground force commander who is the person on the ground making the calls, and you just help them, give them advantages on how we can, win that battle. It's shocking to me that we fought this war 20 times, right? World War II, you got there, we didn't leave till it was done. And that is the number one thing that I've learned in war college and everything else. Like, we just should have stayed there till it was over with, because you keep recycling it every year, right? And you write your awards and you won the war that year, but it's not over with, right? And it keeps going. And the failure showed when we withdrew. That it still hurts, right? We literally returned the country back to the country we went to atone for 9/11. So I still have a hard time intellectually grappling with that. And historians and leaders will deal with that for many, many decades. But yeah, that's the cycle. And so, but at the end, it's fascinating to go through it, and I'm glad I did my part to help. And the 2 tours ago, the current chairman was our deputy commanding general, and that's the famous moment when he met Donald Trump, and he was like, "Sir, if you let us prosecute this war legally and violently, like our military is capable of doing," he literally said, "they will surrender within 90 days." This was December. I was home on leave because my commanding general, who my first boss, the 2-star, was on leave. And so the JAG goes, all the personal staff go when your primary goes, right? And then the rest can handle it. So he was away. And then the DCG, which was General Kane, was in charge. And this is where Trump, out of nowhere, and Melania came to LL.M base on Christmas Eve. And they were there with, there's a SEAL team there and our troops. And that's when he met. And that's when he keeps calling him Raising Cane, right? And as we said, if you let us unleash, let us fight the war like we're built for, they will defeat in 90 days. And they literally surrendered March 19th ish, 2019, 90 days from Christmas Eve, because we went after them very hard, legally, ethically, morally, responsibly, fiscally, maybe not fiscally, because it's Hellfire missile almost for every kill that we had, but they surrendered. And that the physical caliphate of ISIS, remember, we left in 2011. You were there. That's when you got out. Iraq said, "We don't want you here." So we left. By 2014, ISIS had control of a third of Iraq and a third of Syria, bar none. And they were doing everything a country does. They were running it judiciously. They had their own Sharia law. They were picking up trash. They were printing gold. They were selling crude oil. They were doing everything that a nation does legally. And at some point, you have to recognize them as a country if no one's going to stop them. That's just what the international law is at some point, right? So Iraq asked us back in 14, and we didn't defeat the physical caliphate until 19. And so there's crazy stuff that happened in that time period, all kinds of, which we can get into, crimes against humanity, especially against the Yazidis and the sexual slaves, with all the way through. Iraq, the counterterrorism service, Iraq is very amazing force. They're absolutely the one that saved Iraq, in my opinion, and we trained them. And that was General Kane. His primarily mission partner was CTS, and but it took us from 11 to 9, so 8 years, right? And so that was a big deal. And I'm glad that we did it. I'm very proud of what we did to at least defeat the physical caliphate. They're still in the shadows. They're still causing havoc, and you're never going to ever eradicate an evil like that. But I'm glad that we had that part.
No, that's very profound, because there's a lot of that I remember, right? In 06, there was this huge, it was literally called the Awakening, right? Where the region that I was in Al-Qaim and Al-Anbar, was really nut to butt to Syria, right? Along the Euphrates, I think it is. And everything that we saw, it depended 1,000%. I don't know if anybody understands how gravity big time that is. It's huge, massive, for the Iraqi people to do what they needed to do. When we were there, hey, I'm not saying that there's not a war going on in Saddam Hussein and all this horrible stuff, but there was a lot of insurgency to the point where, we have to develop the exact thing that you were saying, the counterterrorism squads and all the different the teams, the military teams, the police officers teams, the medical teams that provided the ability to put foot to ass for a mission like that. Because at the end of the day, we, World War II, we had to leave it to somebody else, because we have to now go home and do what we need to do here. And this is where people kind of get a little delusional on the construct of terrorism, right? There is no end date to an ideology. This never goes away, right? We can only influence outcomes by providing a different form of incentives. I saw kids blow themselves up with VBD, the vest-borne IEDs, the vehicle-borne IEDs, because their local, I was going to say sheriff, but their local sheikh or their imam or whatever it was had massive influence on their day-to-day life. Like you were saying, like, these are the guys taking care of the trash. These are the guys, printing monies and conducting themselves as a legitimate organization, which in truth, if we didn't do the things that we did in Syria at the level that we did it, or the things that we did in Iraq, Afghanistan, which sadly enough, I just had this conversation with a great lady. She was very much involved in Afghanistan and understanding the withdrawal, right? And the level of, we can't allow leadership to put ourselves yet into another war 10 to 15 years from now, because that one kid that was around and saw America this way or that way is now influenced by this next round of just whomever's going to pick up the sword. And I don't mean it in a bad way, because I saw it where Iraqis came together and they provided the military teams and their police teams, and there was a lot of internal strifes. You brought up the Yazidis. It's one of the most softest points in my heart, right? The Yazidis never get talked about, right? And I don't mean it just like the Kurds or the there's another group of them, and Chaldean, right? And all these different people. But the Yazidis, I remember not serving them, but serving them for their medicine, like their medical needs. There was families that I just didn't know Iraq had. I didn't know so much about the environment, the history, right? I go back to Mesopotamia now, because that's how far you got to go back to identify with this culture, these people. It's a very ancient land. It's a very ancient ethos. So to have their conversations and to treat their persons and to know that that's what was happening, the trafficking, the opportunistic leveraging of people's vulnerabilities, it tears me up. For you to come home to this, the way that our nation is now, how do you think we, as two gentlemen having a great conversation, right? And of course your book, but how do we have a better understanding of the gravity of what we did and what we need to keep doing?
So we're 250, right? It blows my mind. I can't even comprehend how on earth this amazing land from sea to shining sheet, is only 250 years old. And you just talked about ancient civilizations in China or Egypt or the Middle East or South America, and when we have Native Americans, there's absolutely, I'm not going to ever disparage the history there, but it was a very, very vast land, and 13 colonies. It took 100 years to go to California to bind it all together. So it's a journey, but it's still only 250 years old. So it's hard for me to comprehend that knowledge and history when you look at the world. And the cities were very difficult. I mean, they mass assassinated all the men. And I had to go to mass graves, and the UN with people from the International Criminal Court community that were there, because we have to document it. We have to, there's graves. Maybe you can use it for evidence. I'm not sure, because a lot of the ISIS men that probably did that are no longer on this earth. Thanks to the coalition, get rid of that evil, but they're still there. And then all the women were taken as brides, and we had 300 children that were born from 2011 to 2019 due to sexual slavery. I mean, there's no other way about it. One of the most potent things I've ever saw in my life was in our female engagement teams, which are in special forces, are amazing soldiers, sailors, airmen, females, and they would help these women take off their burqas in Syria after they surrendered, and put the burqa into a fire pit and just fell on their knees and wept, because they were finally done with this horrible travesty. And I'll never ever forget witnessing that, or the smell, as we went through that area. And then it went from a major combat operations to an insane legal mission. Now, what do you do with these 2,000 detainees, or however you want to describe them? They're from all. It's very similar to, in my opinion, to our southern border. Like, we have many people who entered our country illegally, right? And some joined for nefarious means with cartels or other areas from all over countries. The same thing happened in ISIS. You had people from all over Europe, thousands from France and Germany and Britain that would come, Americans that would join ISIS for this ideology that they thought was, whatever reason why they did that. And then they surrendered, and now we're controlling them. Like, what do we do with them, and what law do you use? We tried to get them back to the one of the governments was France. Like, well, here's your French citizens. They have their passports. You want them back? And they're like, no, like, because the system of law. I mean, you're going to have a Western system of law. What evidence you can use? Half it's classified. The chain of evidence, like, it's terrible, right? And so Iraq was very similar, because they modeled their law, or counterterrorism law, very similar to ours, with the authorization of use of force that we started after 9/11, which is basically, if we feel you're a threat to our nation, it doesn't matter where you are, we can prosecute you, we can go after you. Iraq did the same thing, very similar. And they're like, well, we view they're a threat, we're going to try them in our system. And if we try them in our system, it's going to be quick. The appeal process is not very long. And let's say we put them in, and they have a 3-judge panel. There's no jury. It's very different than our law, because I mentored them for years at many tours, and they're very prosecutorial judges. They ask a lot of questions. So the prosecutor and the defense don't do a lot. It's the judges ask a lot of questions, and they determine whether the person's guilty or not. And then there's an appeal process that goes to another level, but it's done pretty quick. And at the end of that period, let's say 90 days, no more than 6 months, if it's done, their typical sentence is death by hanging. And so we'd explain that to other nations, and they're like, well, no, you can't do that. We're like, okay, do you want to back? You want to put them through the system? And you're like, and we're trying to mentor our partner. Like, I can't tell them what to do. I give them options, but they were like, look, you're either going to take these citizens back. If they're your citizens, and you're going to try them in your system or whatever you're going to do with them, or we're going to try them because they are a threat to our nation based on our laws. And so, I left after no clue what it was. I just know that there's a detention facility in Iraq that's funded by many countries, that were sentenced in the Iraq system, that weren't given the death penalty, and they're going through that. So, but it's very complex, right? And the children, like, so 2011, 2019, you have all these 300 children born, they weren't in school. So how do you school these children to show them the way of life that the rest of the world is under, right? Just the basics and how, the whole process. And then it was very bizarre and very difficult. And you worked, you hardly had any sleep because every day something new came up. One where an American father was calling our embassy because the mother took the children, or at least it was one son, over to the area, joined ISIS, and the mother, I think, if I recall correctly, passed away or wasn't there, and the father was trying to find the kid, right, who's in some of these detention facilities, and it was a mass chaos, and try to, pleading with, this father trying to find, his child, and that he couldn't get into, he was in Egypt. He flew to Egypt, tried to get in the area, and we had to work with that. So just every day was something different. But, I'm very thankful for the leaders, and I've worked. This is what I love about my military. I joined under Bill Clinton, then George Bush, then Barack Obama, and then Donald Trump, and then Joe Biden, and now Donald Trump. And that's the essence of who we are. And our chairman is amazing at this. We don't dictate policy, we implement policy based on the commander in chief. And that's who it is. And I've always felt that way all the way through. And I've served with my entire career was half and half, between each party. And I'm very, very proud of that.
No, that's a great way of putting a huge dynamic complexity of a situation where, let's go back to it. We are 250 years old, folks. This is not like the king was doing some joke stand up to Congress. To me, it founded a very funny note to me, where he goes, what do we call 250 years? Yesterday. The dynamic of our nation and the youth we have. Of course, we're leaders in many, many fronts. One of this is something I want to highlight because of the tone of where responsibility falls. Some nations don't want to take account for their citizens who literally are creating the circumstances that are continuing the fight because of financial restraints, either financial restraints, political restraints, optics, you name it. The United States of America stands up and stands with any nation trying or doing their best, period. That's the way it's been. That's the way it always will be. I think it's this way, though, sometimes, where we forget the complexities of a society, much like how you brought up detainment centers, right? There's plenty of them in or around Iraq, right? I worked with one, right? In one for a bit of a time. In the processings of these individuals at our time, my intersection of this grievance of not taking enough action resulted in horrible situations, infiltration of this and that, targeting, you name it. People forget that the years between 2011 to 2019, the caliphate and all these different apparatus of ISIS, right, in the Levant, whoever started saying that shit, right? What I can say is it was very, very dynamic and complex, because this is not individual insurgencies within the region of these people, right? This is kind of like a free-for-all, much like you brought up the border. I know this to be fact, okay? I know this intimately, sadly enough, about the United States-Mexican border, having family on both sides of the argument, right? This is not what people are going to sit down with and understand unless we kind of dive in just a little bit further. The dynamic of representation, legal rights, human rights, the observation of not just what is right, but what is wrong and how to apply it. The United States is the only nation that does this with the very people that are trying to destroy us. Okay. Every other nation, like you mentioned it, Iraq, good luck trying to get enough appeals. They're going to hang you. They did it to Saddam. Really, really, really interesting thing to watch. Right. We took out our Zakawi when I think it was in 06, right? All of our teams there and everybody did it. It was beautiful. But I don't like the tone that this nation brings to this action, this truth of actuality, where the dynamics are such, right? An ideology, a religion, a radicalized concept. We all know it's not worth the time. Cults, even the United States, have massive effects right here in San Diego. If people forget that, the whole people wearing brand new tennis shoes and just drinking the Kool-Aid, literally, okay? Drinking the Kool-Aid. You know, sometimes, like you brought it up a little bit at the beginning of the show, you really believe in it. And that's okay to believe and have faith in things. But when you're literally taking advantage of people and manipulating their faith, manipulating their vulnerable, the most vulnerable consequences and circumstances, a mother taking a child and then the father looking for them because of this radicalization, this happened more than I care to think about, because when we were covering it back in the day, there was at least 3 or 4 white females that went from the United States, then became some kind of radical whatever. I remember following it up. I remember reading a couple stories on it. I could just imagine. But as you brought up, there's 400, 300 children that were birthed due to this situation. And it's important to say, then who's responsible for making sure these kids don't repeat the same thing that their fathers did? Right? We don't know what they're going to go to bed with in between their ears. We don't know what they're waking up to. What we do know is the United States of America stands for freedom. It stands for faith. It stands for the people who are doing the right thing in all nations. And sometimes we don't get it right. Okay. Sometimes we don't get it right, like the pullout in Afghanistan. But we do have to have these strong conversations to really realize who we are and who we're putting and elevating into these positions. Much like you said, you're not the one calling the shots. They're the ones calling the shots. You just make sure they have enough tools, enough resources, enough assets, enough information to make the best possible decision as a nation, as an individual, as leaders, as commandants or commanders or generals, admirals. That's the gravity of every single decision we make on a battlefield. I really want to hit home on it a bit for the inspiration of the company you keep. How did you come up to this book, and how did these experiences that we've discussed today so far, how did it really ignite a fire in you to create such a book?
Well, it started in 2009. So the United States Army created a United States Army Legal Command. And so there's 23 06 colonel commands in the Army of mostly JAGs, and they're put in there's 23 across the nation. Maybe there's probably 26 now. And they stood it up. And what people don't understand is in World War II, General Marshall would not go over 100. We had 100 fighting divisions in World War II, 100 numbered divisions. I can name them ours right now. 1st Infantry Division, 2nd Infantry Division, 3rd Infantry Division, 4th Infantry Division, 18th or 82nd Airborne, 10th Mountain Division, right? Those are the ones that we know now. There was 100 in World War II. And so what these legal commands are created for is if we ever have to go back to those divisions, you plop this command in, and they were going to, they'll fall in place on a division, because a division needs a very significant legal staff. They always have. And they probably put it all under a general officer, and his name is Gil Beck, the greatest human I've ever worked for in my life. I have learned so much about leadership and just about being a good person, a good man or woman, good leader, good family, everything. I mean, if I emulate everything that he does, I have lived a wonderful life, and he's influenced me so much. I haven't talked to him in years. I talked to him a couple years ago. Before that, it was forever. But just, he's the type of person when you're speaking to him, you feel like you're the most important person in his life at that moment. And I've tried to emulate that before when I've mentored thousands of people. I get calls every week on people, usually junior officers or people who join the military or whatever. And I stop what I'm doing and I do exactly what he taught me to do, is listen to whatever they're going through and try to give them the best advice that you can. Anyway, but he was the first commander in that. And then he said, David, because of your diverse background and you were an infantry officer in a National Guard company, I want you to talk to, because most JAGs are direct commission, right? They don't have a military experience. I was enlisted, officer command school, and then an infantry platoon leader for a couple of years. And, I want you to help these JAGs to realize, the majesty and the power and the majestic of our NCO Corps, which is the backbone of our Army. These NCOs, they put an E7 in a platoon with a 22-year-old lieutenant and about a 35-year-old, E7, and that they do that on purpose, and they're the team, right? And there's so many NCOs I've learned from forever, and all the way to my last couple of tours. My battle buddies that I work out with are the chief of staff of 2-star division and the command sergeant major, because the JAG, the chief of staff, and the command sergeant major are the primary advisors to that commander, besides the chaplain, and misconduct or whatever. Those are the 3 people that he or her listens to. And so we got to be tight. So we work out together. We eat all our meals together all the way through. But early on, I then would go to the brand new captains and lieutenants, and we'd have these regional training centers every year, like 5 in a year, where all these 23 or portions of 23 would get together, and I would just talk about it. And I created the company you keep, and I started with the Army leadership values, which is an acronym for leadership, which is loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And I'd write examples of it. I sent it to you earlier. And then I would just talk about these things that I have seen, because I have a unique perspective of being an executive in a Fortune 500 company for 30 years and being an officer now for 30 years. And I've seen, the leadership is leadership. It doesn't matter if you're running a nonprofit or Fortune 500 or a frontline combat soldier. You still got to do the things that are required to lead people, right? Lead by example. Lead a recon. You and I recon for 30 minutes on setting up our computer stuff and how it works, right? And that's what started it. And then I just I think I can, I don't know everything, but I know some things, and I've experienced a lot, and I think I can help others, that are, I love reading all the time. And you read a book, and I tell people, if you read a book and you learn 3 things, that's awesome, right? You're smarter now. The rest of it can diminish it or whatever. But if you learn 3 things that you need to apply in your life, you're going to be a better human. And so that's what I want to do. And I want to, spread it on that. I will tell you, one of the things you brought up earlier was one of the things I talk about is, trust but verify, is Abu Ghraib. I was a first lieutenant in Iraq, brand new, first time. And the first thing they sent me on was to look at 300 pictures from Specialist Granger from his camera of the horrible atrocities that he did in Abu Ghraib with the Iraqi prisoners there. And some of them are so terrible, I'm not going to put on this podcast, but I would then take statements from the Iraqis that were in prison and match it to the photos. And it was profound and disgusting. And and that's where I knew from my being a officer candidate school and infantry, it was that's where the leadership didn't check this stuff, because the first night it was all 3rd shift, right? And they were Army Reserve or National Guard or doesn't matter. They were a military police unit without supervision. And they did all these atrocities on 3rd shift in Abu Ghraib at night. And I guarantee you, the most terrible things they did didn't happen on day 1. It just graduated because no one was trust but verify. No one was checking them. No leadership was going at 2 a.m. checking on your troops or walking down the line or doing a maneuver with them. They got away with this because there was no authority. And it took I don't remember exactly, but it was a new soldier coming in, like an E5, E6. It was this is effed up. And he's the one who went to authorities. I think he might have went to a chaplain or someone. It was this is crazy. And the whole stack of cards came down. That's one of the things that I've always told them is you believe your subordinates that work for you and the troops, but you got to go out there. You got to be in the front, and everyone who says, oh, you're a JAG, you're always in the back. I get it. JAGs are next to the commander, who are as far front as they can be in any situation because of the atrocities that happened in basically Vietnam. My life started it all, where, now they put JAGs really close to the front with the commander. Like everywhere he or she went, I was right there with them. And it took a while, but once you get that relationship and they trust you because you're a soldier first, right? You're doing all the stuff the soldiers doing. I've been a paratrooper my entire career, mostly special forces, all infantry, and I did all the soldier stuff. I went to sniper school when I was an infantry officer, from the Army National Guard, which is amazing. And I graduated. I wasn't the top gun, but I graduated, so I'm happy with that. But I jumped and I did I did 3 levels of combatants at 5th Special Forces Group. I was the JAG there during a time period in 2011, and the commander was amazing. Colonel Robert, he was like, his initial counseling, doesn't matter who you were, chaplain, comptroller, JAG, S1, it doesn't matter. If you were reported to that headquarters at 5th Special Forces Group, your initial counseling was 6 o'clock in the morning in the combatives room with the command sergeant major and him. And you wrestled with both of them. And while they're asking, tell me about your family, they're really, really good at what they're doing. And so I thought that was amazing style of leadership. It's like, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And your first counseling statement with this leader is in the combatives room. And you're doing MMA. And I was like, sir, I've always wanted to do this. It's hard to do this Army Reserve because it takes stealing. He was like, I got you. And he let me do 3 levels of combatives, Army 1 and 2 and the Special Operations Commanders program. And I'm a JAG, but he knew the value of it. And he got, while I was there at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, he let me do those 3. And then he sent me forward to Soda North in Missouri 3. So that's the type of leadership, like, that's the people you want to emulate. Like, they get it, right? And he eventually became a 1-star, and now I think he's a chancellor or something with one of the schools in Tennessee. But I would. Let me tell you one more story about it. One more story. You're gonna love this. Every Friday, he would have staff officers report to do PT, right? And so it was raining, it was cold. We ran about 6 miles, and it was terrible. And then he took off into the woods. And so all the staff, we're running through the woods, and we're like, oh, this sucks. And then he had stations set up, like move a Humvee, buddy carry, water jugs, whatever. And it was, it took like 2 hours. It was terrible. And it was cold and stuff. And I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, so I'm all loving this, And on the way back, he turned the corner. He goes, all right, we're running back to post, which was another, 4 miles or whatever. And you could see everybody like, oh, And around the corner, he had a bus waiting for us filled with McDonald's breakfast sandwiches. He got around the bus and he said, I need you all to look at, your attitude, your behavior when I said we're running back. He's going to look at you now. And he didn't say this, but another in my head said, duly noted. We got in the bus, he drove us back. I was like, that guy I'd walk through hell for a guy like that or a woman like that.
That's amazing, right? Genuine quality leadership, I think, it's the profound basic foundation of a good nation, a good branch, a good platoon, a good squad, a good person, right? I know nobody's perfect, but when you do that, and I just had a great conversation with another guest yesterday. When you work into the mindset of your persons, the ones you're responsible for, your soldiers, your sailors, your Marines, your airmen, your whatever Space Force calls them, Coast Guardsmen, all those guys, everybody. But like you said earlier,
Guardians,
there you go. It transcends from the military to corporate mindsets, to all mindsets. It's a mindset, right? To emulate. And that's what I love. I love that word because it goes so much further than, copy, paste, or, fake it till you make it. It's like, no, you got to understand what it is. And I grew up wrestling. That's the reason why I love it when people get into combatives. You're learning a new a new way to move this thing, this fleshy popsicle that we got, this corpus, and you're in it.
Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Exactly. And that's where I think it's so much more important for our generation, our aged people, our human beings coming through this evolution of technology and application and ease. We can't forget the basics, which is get through it, run those 6 miles, get those water cans, move that Humvee, keep going. Oh, you're sad we're going to run back? Cool. Guess what? Here's the surprise. Next time, it won't be like this, or next time it will be like this. But every time you have to come with the right attitude. I think attitude is such a important factor to the human experience. Okay, there's attitudes that people exude that gets them traumatic experiences and consequences. There's attitudes that create those negative consequences, and you can choose to carry it further. But it's something in the Bible that I always reflect back to is about long suffering and being cheerful. Being cheerful is not, hey, this is great, I love it. But when you embrace the suck, that's exactly what that scripture is saying to me in my head, right? Is you can't forget the subtleties of what it is we do day to day, hour to hour, minute by minute, more so when we're in the spotlight of leadership. When we're in the spotlight of leadership, we may not feel that everybody's counting on us, but that's kind of the catch-22 is not everybody even knows that they're counting on you. The moment leadership shits the bed, that's when people start realizing how important it is, because we're sitting back, we're looking at each other going, how did this happen? How did this situation, and it could be as horrible as multiple deaths. It could be full squad wipes like the kids do in the games, right? But that's based off of reality, right? We didn't have the logistics. We didn't have the support. We didn't have the confidence to execute mission. All of those things equate to a piss poor outcome. When we incorporate that mindset, like yourself in this book, right? The company you keep, putting this together and creating that thing that lasts a lifetime and beyond, because here's that next generation is going to be able to pick it up. They're going to be able to read those words. They're going to be able to reflect about it. I've seen a lot of gentlemen write books, okay, a lot, some that probably should not have, okay? And maybe I think society is missing the importance of quality and foundational truths, actuality, right? Like you said, you're a JAG, you're a reservist, but the heart doesn't change the fact that you're serving your nation at the capacity that you did. The heart didn't change the fact that you're able to do combatives training, which to anybody out there, it is difficult. All the courses in any combatives training is difficult. If you go to SEER, it's difficult. It's all adding more to your plate, and it's work, and it's hard. Specialized schools like becoming a JAG, specialized schools becoming a corpsman like I did, or a doctor, or even further up, trauma surgeon. There's all these abilities that we forget that start with the foundations of leadership and genuine qualities that are derived from core ethics and principles, right? Exactly like what we were talking about earlier. You're this young man, right, from a town that you didn't go but anywhere close to 100 miles away from, to now being this gentleman after 30 years, being to all these different continents, all these different countries, serving in all these different capacities, having to be exposed to tremendous trauma of others, of self, of experiential things. It's disgusting, right? It's hard, but that is the work. And I understand it's difficult, right? What do you see yourself as in this book helping to change or elevate the leadership qualities in today's youth?
Well, first off, you can't do it alone, and you're with a partner, right? You talked about your kids earlier, and your amazing wife, and I got married at 22 years old from a girl who lived in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, which is even more remote than I was, and for the grace of God, she's still with me 33 years later. So I did 8 combat tours, and one of the things that we do in the Army is we put these. Let me see that. These on our uniform every 6 months in combat goes on our right arm, right? And I got 11, so it's almost 6 years of combat, and that's not training, that's not travel, that's not normal Army stuff or JSETs or other missions that you do. Those are defined combat zones, day one starts until you leave. And you only get a child for 18 years, right? So I've missed a third of my 4 children's life, like physically gone, and so I'm very, very thankful to my spouse. There's a country song that says, my boys aren't in jail, my daughter's not a stripper. And it's so true. My kids are so amazing, and they're absolutely crushing it. And it's the partnership, and this amazing mother that they have. I'm sure I had my part. Technology was amazing. I was in Afghanistan in 2012, and I was in the mountains in the north. It was freezing. We were training village stability operations, so we're training commandos in the villages up there, and it was, very well. Everything's dangerous. It was very dangerous, but you're in the villages, so it was crazy. And that's the first time I was on a post. If I recall, maybe earlier it was a little bit different, but where it had true Wi-Fi, like you could. And so I had my iPad. I connected to I'm sure expensive government contract on a satellite that sent it somewhere. We had Wi-Fi. And the first night I was there, I'm tired, I'm cold. I literally landed in Bagram from Fort Bliss, Texas, in Kuwait, and got like 2 hours later onto Bagram and landed at 3 a.m. There's 2 stories, I'll tell you that. First off was Joe Leach. He's a Fifth Special Force Group with one of my best friends in the world. That's leadership. He knew I was coming. He called me Steve Lee. He thought my name was Steve Lee for whatever reason. That's our joke now. And I'm on a C-130 with 3 people on it. One was a sergeant major in JSOC or something. He literally had a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist that you see in the movies. And I'm telling you absolutely the truth. And he's 6'10", just massive guy. Me and like 3 other people, and I'm like, because when I got to Bagram, I'm like, hey, we got a special op plane leaving. You can join on that, and they'll land you. So I'm like 6 people on it, and I land in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m, and that dude was waiting for me on a remote tarmac, because that's what we do. That's leadership. Like, he knew one of his own from 5th Group was coming in. Thought it was Steve Lee. He said the wrong name. He was like, hey. And I come out there and I'm clueless. And it's in the Mazar-e Sharif. When you have the normal army base, then you have the special ops. You have the crazy special ops are on the north. They actually call it Team America. Then you have our special ops, which was conventional, as Siege of Sodef. No, it was a Sodef. Sorry. Siege of Sodef was in Bagram. The Sodef was in the north. Special Operations Task Force North. And he's there. And, 3 a.m, cold, middle of February, and he's there, and he breaks you, gets you in a truck, he takes you to the place. That is pure leadership. That's what you do. Same dude. We're in Mazar-e Sharif, and there's a dining facility for Mark Mitchell, American hero, Silver Star, 5th Group prior commander, and then a Colonel Brower came afterwards. And so we took pictures of the Mark Mitchell dining facility, right? We take a picture of it, and then we email it to our current commander at 5th Group. Like, hey, sir, we see the Mark Mitchell dining facility. We're wondering, where's yours at? We can't really find, like, which one facility is yours. And his response to the email was like, I got something. He's a combative guy. He's like, I got something for you both when you get back. Just mess with it. But that's the humor. And one of the coolest thing there is, before I left, the public affairs officer gave me a grid location. This gives me shivers right now. He said, here's a grid location no one knows about. I go, okay. And he said, go to there. And once you're there, tell me you're there, and then I'll tell you what it is afterwards. It's the place that the horse soldiers in October after 9/11 took steel from the World Trade Center. They had a ceremony, and they buried it at this place in Mazar-e Sharif. That's the place they went to, in this location. So there's steel the World Trade Center, buried at this grid location, and all 5th groupers, well, not all, but most of them, find that grid, and we go there and we take a picture or set location. No, I'm not going to tell you where it is, but it's very solemn. And there's pictures of them doing a ceremony when they took that steel and they buried it in the ground. So those are the 2 things, which are amazing. But that's the stuff that you want to, it's the little things when you talk about leadership. It's not hard, be a good person. And a lot of it's just, going above and beyond to be at 3 a.m, to meet that person at the facility, to stop what you're doing and take that phone call and help someone through. I have so many mentors in my life. Even today, I got so many amazing Americans that are, very, very high levels of the Department of Defense right now, and the Army and Judicial General Corps. They're like, and these are people I've worked with forever. And your reputation, you don't build that in one day, right? And you're not perfect. You're gonna falls, but your reputation is gonna follow you, and people are gonna know who you are. And you're a corpsman. Corpsmen are legendary in the Marine Corps because you're Navy, but you wear the Marine Corps uniform. And everywhere I've been, they talk about you guys like in lore. They call you Doc. You're double. Like the General Kane talks about. He just calls sins all the time. He's called me Judge from the day one. And then he was here in Texas a couple weeks ago, and and he's just an amazing human. And I can say right now, I'm so lucky I got selected. I'm going to be his deputy legal counsel for the Army Reserve Billet starting June 1st. Then I cannot wait to work for this amazing human again, because he is the right person in the right time, and he's absolutely so many leadership lessons from him. You can see it every time. What I love it when he does a briefing, he tells you who's the youngest service member in that mission, went to Venezuela, and who's the oldest. What it gives you backgrounds, and while we're in Iraq, he would have different days. He'd bring all the staff together, and he was like, "Hey, on this day, Operation Red Wings happened, or some other mission, and we lost our service members, so we're going to have a moment of silence for these people." He did that routinely. It's not a show. It's not. We're in the middle. We're in a special operations. We call it the Black Gates, like this crazy facility on Union 3 across from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, where all the special forces were at the time. And he'd bring all the staff together, and like once or twice every couple of weeks, he'd bring everybody together, and he'd give a milestone that happened in our military that day. And he brought it home, and he did it. I mean, he was a 1-star National Guard Air Force officer at the time. And now he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But that's the type of stuff that you want to run to, right? That's the type of leadership that is going to take care of you. And I've never, ever heard of anybody who worked for that person who doesn't rave about them like I am right now. And those are the leaders that you want to emulate.
Yeah. That's perfect, because a lot of people do get caught up in the performative of what it means to serve your nation, right? I call it the circus, because it really is, everybody, we have our clowns, we have our stuntmen, we have our trapeze act, we got the guy that teams beers, okay? And that's the reality of such a big army. Right? I understand the gravity of the Army. I understand the gravity of the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force. We have a tremendous opportunity to carry our nation another 250 years, right? And it starts with these observations of genuine leadership, authentic, caring, not the performative, right? And I love that you talked about that. Today was the day Operation Red Wings hit. This is the day that Zarqawi went down. All these different things we do to remind ourselves and to not become complacent. I think the most detrimental aspects of military service come from complacency internally, where maybe some people had to run back 6 more miles, and it just kind of struck a nerve, like leadership's doing this. I always found it to be important for leadership to communicate, not necessarily to the point where you're questioning your authority or maybe relinquishing control, but to the point where you can clarify. I do this with my children all the time, which is very hard, but it's something that I've learned the hard way, which is if we don't communicate, if we don't share, even the things that you're timid or intimidated about, the things that you're afraid I might react to, then I can't step in. I can't help you out. Like my young man, he messed up in school a little bit, taking a little lackadaisical, didn't turn in all his assignments the way he was supposed to. And I really checked in with him, got on his level and said, "Hey, is it schools? Is it a problem? Is it something you're not understanding? Is it this or that?" And then also in another day, same days, literally earlier in the day, that my two boys were kind of going at it, pushing each other back and forth. And I checked them more assertively, like, hey, you know, get the fuck back. Don't do that shit. You guys are going to push each other down, ... And then I broke into it. I was like, so what created this circumstance, right? It's brotherly love the most of the time that they don't want to identify as love, right? When you made the joke to your partner back at fifth group, you know, about the chow hall, I'm like, yeah, look at, this is what love is. This is what love of a nation is. It mirrors the truth of what sacrifice and service mean. It creates the valid foundation of a book like yours with the company you keep. It allows itself to become that next phase of not just warfare or war college or, you know, all the different grad schools that you can leverage this into for corporate mentalities or leadership. The way that I see the effective ability to bring stories like yours out today, especially highlighting General Kane, right, where we're looking at the potentials of the next maybe few months, right? This is huge, these opportunities that you as an individual have, but also the opportunities that we as a nation have, right? This July 4th, I think I'm going to be the most excited I can be. Maybe have a couple beer rooskies or three and just chillax, because it's something that we have to come into this stride as a nation, right? We've hit our pain points. We've reflected on what needs to be rehashed, and I think that as a nation we come together to support these things, to illuminate the truth, like that ceremony out in Afghanistan, where, you know, I think it's beautiful to have ceremonies and ritual, because that's what creates habits, that's what creates psychology, that's what creates truth and understanding, is when you look back at stories, right, and you look back at days that you were god awfully tired and cold, right, and you're looking back now in hindsight after 30 years, and you're transitioning to yet another amazing opportunity to continue to serve. I do want to ask, if you could go back to your younger self, and this, well, you know what? Let's get the shout outs first. Okay. We'll get the shout outs first. Is there any shout outs that you'd like to give out, plugs or promotions, any organization, nonprofit, anybody that we can bring attention to?
Oh, there's so many. I went to a military event. It's called the Cowtown something. It was in Fort Worth Club. And the speaker was the former commandant, I think it's Amos of the Marine Corps. Is that correct? Amos, was that one of them? And he was their keynote speaker. And we raised $250,000 for veteran causes. And the thing that hit me the most is he said, our government cannot take care of our soldiers, our service members alone. We need private entities and institutions to do the rest of the story. And it really hit me, because this was an organization that goes above and beyond, you know, and they raised a bunch of money that night. And I realized, I was like, no, we can't rely on the government to take care of, you know, we've been in combat. This is the longest we've been in combat operations, you know, since the history of our nation, right? And, you know, it's hard if you've been there the whole time mentally. I had to get some help. I'll be the first to admit it. You know, a few years ago, it was bad. And I wasn't processing stuff. My fight or flight never shut off. I needed help. And I sought it. And I got, you know, help to get to where I am now, which I'm hitting on all cylinders right now. But it was tough, you know, because you don't want to be the failure or feel like, you know, you're failing your family. And, you know, it hurts to even talk about it. But I realized I needed help. And because it's not normal to see and do, and you're a corpsman, I mean, to see and do the things that humans have to do in the worst of human activities is not a normal behavior. You know, to see people die in front of you, or see them on kill TV, and you know you're watching someone's life is about to end, and you do that 1,000 times, right? Or just accidents. You know, I was at a track event. I left. Ironically, it was in Soda North, and I was at a track event. I just got home, right? Just finished my 6-month tour. And I've done mostly year tours, but this one was only 6 months. got back. I've been at a track event. My son is blazing. All my boys are gifted by from their mother on athletic abilities. And they have played collegiate sports. And this one, he's a captain of the United States. All my boys are at the United States Merchant Marine Academy, which I'll tell you right now to all your people, that is the best secret in the entire military community. It's a federal academy. Their options are unlimited in what they can do. They don't have to pick what branch they want to go into or their job at 18. It's in Kings Point, Long Island, New York. It's just an amazing institution. And all my boys played sports there. So my oldest one, who's in the he's in the special communities, put it that way, in the military. He's crushing it. Second one's a naval engineer, and the third one, who's my senior, very fast. He's captain of the football team at Merchant Marine Academy. They played Coast Guard Academy, which is their mini Army Navy game, in Fenway Park. Secretary Duffy and Secretary Nome was there, and Merchant Marine Academy won in like Hollywood fashion. It was just unbelievable. It was last fall. But he was a track. So he's really fast. So he's in a track event, and my phone started ringing, right? And so a couple of Army buddies, we stay connected. I'm in a track event, right? So I kept hitting no. The fourth person from the same tour called me. Sorry. Anyway, a friend of mine, Paul Volke. Sorry. Give me a sec.
It's okay.
2:30 in the afternoon. He's the executive officer. And MRAP in the Chris Yard was backing up. He went to go tell me he needed a ground guide, and he got crushed against the high school barrier. Died instantly. And by that fourth call,
Jesus.
Yeah, terrible. 2:30 in the afternoon. So I tell everybody, everything you do in the military when you're deployed is dangerous. Doesn't matter what it is. And now he's got two sons that I stay in touch with the family, but it was terrible. I think 6 people. Sorry, 6 people died, and all my tours. And so I was in a dark place on Memorial. So I'll get my.
It's okay.
Oh, yeah.
Take a beat.
I got this.
I'm with you.
Yep, and you're a medic, so you see it. Yep.
I'm with you.
And so Memorial Day, one day, I live in Flower Texas, and a lady was like, "Happy Memorial Day." They're a civilian; they don't know. And I'm like, "Happy," And I started crying in the car, and then I realized I'm going to change it. I'm going to change the narrative. I'm going to make Memorial Day a celebration, and we would have crawfish bowls out. I have a very wonderful property here. We had like 300 people. I'd airship crawfish in. We used to live in Louisiana. Have a Cajun cook. And we'd have a party, and I would talk about, like John O'Kane, the 6 people who meant the world to me who died in this conflict. Suicide, accident, combat. All of them. One of them were always one of those. I hit the facet. I've had a lieutenant colonel commit suicide, friend of mine, like out of nowhere. And like, it's hard to process, right? I mean, and then, or people die while you're in operations, and they die in front of you, and you witness it. So, but Paul Volke was an amazing human, and we watched Mad Men, the whole episode from start to finish. He was from a wonderful family in New York City, very union firefighters, and he just loved that show. He was the executive officer. I was JAG, and Joe Leach, the buddy I talked about, he was so. The SOTF was filled with the 3rd Infantry Division, which doesn't have a JAG, doesn't have a deputy commanding officer, and doesn't have a command sergeant major who's the of operations, and the intel. And so they were trying to breed a different type of organization, and they put SOF with a heavy intel, the DCO, a sergeant major E9 for the operations, and the JAG, right? Because special forces at a battalion level, you have a JAG, you have a captain. I was a major, but and so they filled it in. So it was new, and then we did village civilian operations in the north. And so there's not very many majors, right? There's 105 and Mike Jason, wonderful human. Learned a lot from him too. Just really, really smart. And then you have the 3, who's an 04, the executive officer who's an 04, the DCO from 5th group when I came from, Joe Leach in 04, and then myself. And so you're kind of lonely at that level, right? There's no one, everyone else is that, companies and battalions, and they don't want to talk to the head shed. So we're really close. And every night after we finish the day, we go into the jock area and we'd plug that computer in and watch, episodes of Mad Men. And so love that guy. And then came home and then, on my phone call and just 2:30 in the afternoon, just some crazy thing. And that it hit. And, but stuff like that is just, it's hard to prepare for because you're not going to, that's another part. And when I read about the book, it is you have to be present on and whenever anything happens, right? I was in corporate America when 9/11 hit, and I remember going in our corporate room and people watching it on TV. And you have to be present because you don't know when you're going to need to be that person of stability, that person of measured response to help people get through because it's not a new experience for them. And that was, but that 4th call, it was very difficult to take it, but we've honored him many times since then on runs like Army 10 miler. We'll have Team Volky. And actually they named the base after him. It shut down like a couple years later, but for a brief time that some random base in Afghanistan was named Camp Volky.
That's amazing.
I hope I answered your question. I don't know. I kind of wandered a little bit. Sorry about
you did. No, I mean, honestly, you answered it better than my question was. You know what I mean? And I love it because it just speaks to the truth of your dedication and your passion and observations of others because things happen, right? Things happen. It's terrible. I had a group of guys that had to experience a horrendous loss, a corpsman and his team. And I think it was either MRAPs or AAV, ended up getting literally just taken away during a massive flood in Iraq. Now, a lot of people don't think about that, right? And I'm like, yeah, dude, life's 100% all the time. Exactly. Okay. So that's where a lot of the things that we expect and we anticipate, we can prepare for. Like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode for certain roles and capacities, being a corpsman, being a JAG, being an SF person, being a cook, being this, being a that, being intel. You have to really get in line with the task. And it's difficult to disassociate in those moments and be that stable person that's strong because then it culminates, right? Here you are at a track meet, things are going great. And here's just that broad end of the sword smacking you right in all the feelings, in the heart, the soul.
The 4th call, and I answered it because I knew something. And I walked away 50 meters, knowing that was going to be a tough call. No clue what it was about. Yeah.
And that speaks to the volumes of experience because I've had those calls. While I'm, at home now, right? And I'm working or I'm doing the podcast. I'm doing creative, venture stuff because that's my outlet. This is how I serve, right? But I get calls, hey, such and such committed suicide. Damn, right? It's always that. Usually for me nowadays, it's that, which is so difficult because I've been there. I've been in the darkest throes of pain, like you were discussing a little bit. You had to get some help. And I'm very fucking happy that worked for you and is getting you back on track because it doesn't have to be your life, right? Sadly enough, my circumstance, it is my life. The majority of my injuries, the majority of me trying to get care, that's what it is. And I'm okay with it because I get to have moments with you and have these conversations about how important it is because the word compartmentalize doesn't fit anymore. This is a truth of understanding and receiving and allowing and empathetically embracing the truth of service. When we lose people, when we lose the ones we love, the ones we served with, I had great friends that we would watch Lost or we would watch or play was the game Halo. Okay. And then yeah. For real, right? We would have like LAN systems plugging in and out. We had a little satellite system we weren't supposed to have either, but it worked. Yeah. And so anyways, next day, hey, what happened? Is he going to come in? No, man, he got, he's not coming back. And it was okay. All right. Well, hey, actually, he does need your help. We need you to carry him from this reefer to that reefer to this reefer to this reefer to this reefer for days on end. And that's where, a lot of the difficulties of service come in, is because as you're literally carrying the brother or sister that you had moments ago or days ago, in and out of these rooms and putting things together to making sure all of their belongings are there, and their families are being informed appropriately, and all the stuff that comes along with actual service. Because this is where I feel that I loved how you answered your question, because my question was simple, right? Who are we going to shout out, right? People? Yeah, that's great. We're shouting out this experience of truth, right? There's not a end all be all to this existence where we all make it out alive, but there is this path, and you're using it with your book to highlight and emulate and show, to shine light on the darkness that does, sadly enough, happen during military service. Many gentlemen that I've spoken with, the other day I spoke with a great gentleman about his time in service, his time before service, and that darkness that we carry. I used to think it was men. Men carry this darkness above themselves, above all, in a way, because we're trying to protect women. We're trying to protect the quote unquote social normatives and structures. And I noticed that during my deployment, especially with the females and kids getting hurt. I never recovered from that. And I don't think I'm supposed to, right? I don't think we as a society are supposed to forget about the Yazidis, the women and children of these nations that we participate in, to render some form of aid, whether it be combative aid, instructional aid, support, logistics, fundamental basics of education, leadership qualities like your own, like especially with the company you keep, where we're going to be able to feel the passion of these stories on a greater scale and target them, right? Use this positive energy to actually accomplishing things. And if people are confused, well, that's not positive, people are dying. Yeah, that means something's going very poorly. And this is my outlook in life, even though, yes, I deal with things daily that most people would be absolutely overwhelmed by or overcome. If you simply look at the problem and say, cool, I see the problem, that means there's a solution. If I know this person's leaking from here or there, and I know that the quantity is a couple of these pads, I know, shit, I'm shit out of luck. We better get the walking blood bank going, right? It's work the problem. Exactly. Some of the most you jumped. So I know you can relate to this, and something somebody taught me was, because I only got to do skydiving, I think once or twice. I did a lot of observation as a corpsman, but not like actually going in or out of the plane.
I landed in a bunch of trees.
There you go. My thing is, when you're coming
not on
down,
purpose.
My thing is, when you're coming down at terminal whatever, just plus or minus terminal velocity, and your thing doesn't work. I had one of my buddies tell me about this. He goes, you know what? You don't even think about it. You're just starting to work the problem. You're working the problem. You're working the problem. And sometimes it works and your shit opens up and you're good. And he goes, because I asked him, do you think this happened? One of his buddy passed away during a training operation. And it would probably be, a tasteless question if it wasn't a corpsman conversation. But I asked him, I was like, do you think, how do you think he processed? He goes, nah, man, he was working the problem all the way down. And that's the end of that. That's just the way it works sometimes. The community comes together in ways where we lose track of things emotionally. When we lose people due to accidents, incidences, combat, suicide, right? All of these things aren't, I don't want to say they're avoidable, right? But they're the most potent and powerful lessons in life that God gives us to say, hey, this is something we need to do together. We can talk about it all day and night, but you're doing it with the book, right? You're bringing the highlights of your service. And I think that's the best shout out we could ever have on the show, is where we don't go, hey, hey, Mike Vin, how you fucking doing? Right? Like, I love that guy. I always give him a shout out. But we're saying, look at the truth to this experience. Look at the passion, right? This is something that we have to carry for the rest of our lives. And no matter what, even at the end of it, I choose to believe at the end of this thing we call right now, right, this life, that eternal life is even it's going to be even more better, right? Where we reflect, right, on this ethereal existence in a plane where maybe, somebody's suffering has ended, whether it be by their hand or accident or combat or other means like cancers and stuff that's just wreaking havoc in the veteran community. It can't be the focus point of what it meant to serve, though. I find this super, super amazing. And I know people always tell me I'm twisted when I think about it, but I go, no, you shared something with this, Dave, that I'm going to cherish the rest of my life, right? It's the sharing of emotion, the sharing of truth and love of your fellow man, your fellow service members, and you're continuing that through, going to where you're going next, right? Where you're going to be able to take that and lift it. And yes, this is that burden, but you're getting stronger every time you pick it up, every time you share this. This is that journey where men like you and I, women who are listening, everybody in the world that's ever served in their capacity of what they're doing for loved ones, right? I think the 1% of the military community that has served our nation out of 365 whatever million it is, we can't forget the why. The why is for the persons that we can't take home. They didn't make it home. The why is because those children, the sons, the daughters, the widows, that of those whom we served with, they need to be taken care of. When you said that, right, about the organization in Texas, that we have to do it for ourselves. We have to bridge this gap between a system and reality, the actuality, and just like we did in combatives, and just the same way that we did in combat, right? Where if you're not leveraging, if you're not pulling in close to see where that fulcrum is, right? You're going to throw somebody on their head, and you're like, you got to get into it. You got to get that hip to dick. That's what I used to call it. Yeah. You got to get into it and look in the eyes, say, hey, where's this weight at? Where's my weight at? Where's my weaknesses? Where's my strength? And judo it up, right? Do that MIC-MAP, do that combatives training, do that wrestling. And if you haven't wrestled before, that's okay. Do the thing that where you take that pressure, that pain, and you sit with it. And I always advise that you pray. And I don't care who you pray to, but pray, meditate, and think, ask, look for guidance, get resources, ask for help, go to the treatments, ask about treatments, which was more effective. The one thing I will tell people is don't start with medication. Don't let that be your first step. Okay. There's just been too much science, too much statistics. And this is my Corman hat coming on, where we have to look at akathisia, where it's the chemically induced suicidality. And I think that it's really more important now for us all to sit back and look at that, observe it, to bring forth the light.
When my darkest moment, I had 24 medications from the VA.
Jesus Christ.
24.
See, that's the thing. I had, for the past 16 years, I've been on every single medication, including morphine, off and on, that people would look at and go, how the fuck are you alive?
No,
and I don't know.
They gave me codeine, Tylenol codeine, like normal codeine. I had to. I went to Texas A&M. My son was gonna, look at their Corps Cadets program, and I forgot the medication. I didn't have it for 3 days while we were up there, and I went into like, whatever you call it. I don't know. What do you call it? Detox.
Withdrawals.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. So I stopped. They tell me every day, right? Yeah. But I do want to add one thing that you hit on, which is so perfect, which is called compartmentalize. Mm-hmm. This is one thing I'm gonna emphasize in the book, where I think you can be a better human. Is, look, I missed a third of my children's life, but the 2/3 that I was there, I compartmentalized it. So you get top secret compartmentalized information. That's TSSCI, right? Secret compartmentalized information, where something very, very important to the national mission secret, but you don't know it all because compartmentalized. And that's a mission that I tell people, like General Beck, when you're talking to him, you're the most important person in his life. That's how you feel. And I try to emulate that to the people. That's called compartmentalizing. So when you're in, you're all in. And that's what I tell people. Whatever you're doing in life, you are all in. Whether it's the kids and you're teaching them whatever. When I'm here, I'm all in. I'm all in right now with you. And that's what I've learned in the military. You said, how many people in the military do you know that you're literally best friends with when you're on a tour and you're on some training mission, like you do everything together, and then 2 years later you can't remember their name? It's insane. But you are all in at that moment and at that time, and you love them to death, and you take a bullet for them. But because that's compartmentalized, and most people don't understand that. They work corporate America, whatever, and they don't realize what all in really means. And the military absolutely does it, because that person you're with can determine whether you're going to survive, right? I made my JAGs. Every time I deployed, I would make them we'd ruck march, right? And in full kit, full gear, 3-day pack, armor, weapon, helmet. And early on, when I was in infantry division in Kuwait, and it was so jacked up. I mean, stuff falling all over the place. It was so ridiculous. And I was like, look, we're doing this not because we're, who a soldier, some crazy. It's because I'm going to send you on a mission to do an investigation or advise somebody. And I need to know that when you land at 3:30 in the morning in Afghanistan, that you can walk to wherever you need to go to with your kit and gear. And remember Iraq, the first night I was there, we were attacked, and you can handle yourself. And I'm going to take you to the range to make sure that you're qualified in your weapon. Because if you're just an attorney who wears camouflage, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I will send you home. But if you're a judge advocate who's a soldier, because guess what? When you go on these convoys that you and I went through, it's senior rank. I was convoy commander probably 100 times because I was typically a higher rank. They don't give two hoots what your uniform doesn't say what you do. It has your rank, and you're convoy commander, and you're the senior person in charge. And I just 2004, 2007, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2018, 19, 20, 21, 24, 25. Those are combat tours. Gone. And every one of them, you're a soldier. They don't. And I try to tell people that it's, you got to get the big, you got to, if you do the little things right, then I can trust you with the bigger things. If you fail on the minor things, then I'm going to be really, really concerned on whether or not you can do the bigger things in life. And so those are some of the things that I try to bring back, focus on the basics. And that's what I love about corpsmen, or any of our medics. They know they do the priorities of work, and they hit, are you breathing? Are you bleeding? Right? Yeah. Those are and they train us on that. Combat lifesaver, all the stuff they put us through, very minimal compared to what you guys do. But you go, and Romulus Diamond, one of my best friends in the world, E7, is an 18 series Delta, I think, Special Forces, but medic, the smartest human I've ever met. And I hope he listens to this someday. He's got 3 college credits. And I have 6 college degrees, and he intellectually is 2 levels above me by far. I mean, this kid's amazing. And he dominated. If you're a medic in the Special Forces, that's basically almost a doctorate in medical. Same as the pararescue in the Air Force or a corpsman, right? What they put you guys through is insane. You are basically a civilian doctor in medical on how they train you in that world. And there's really no other medical profession that I know that does what they do with your world, Navy corpsmen, pararescue in the Air Force, and Special Forces medics. So those are 2-year schools, right? And it's insane. So I'm so impressed with it.
Yeah. The training pipelines get pretty intense, and it really goes back to the same thing, like you're saying. You could either be the medic in the uniform, or you could be the actual person that they call doc and depend on, right?
Yes.
And that's
a term of endearment.
Exactly.
Secretary calls them. He used to call it. I'll be a little vulgar. My biggest pride. I don't have it here. I have it in my man cave in my garage right here. My Special Forces Green Beret gave me, because you're in the jock and they put the titles under it. It said soft jag off. SOF JAGOFF. Soft jag officer. Soft jag off. That usually is a term of detriment. That was a term of endearment. These Green Berets gave me that and put it in front of me because They knew I was a soldier first, lawyer always. I didn't act like I was a Green Beret, but I did all the stuff they did when I needed to, right? When missions. But that's what they put on my title above it. And I view that as a term of endearment.
Absolutely.
Soft jack off.
I swear it sounds like you're pushing a wet noodle, but I love that because it speaks to the truth of the why, right? Going back right to it, the why. The why is we
you
love.
You got to know your why. You got to know your why. People join the military and they do it for like what, especially in SEAL community more, I've seen it. Like because I want to then run for office to do this other stuff. And they miss the point, like, or even the military academies. Like I'm on the board for Brandon Gill, our congressman here. And I'm the only non-military academy person on this committee. So in North Texas is very, very difficult. I mean, you've got the best of America, and it's extremely competitive. Some of the best schools, and you have so many people that join the military in Texas, but North Texas alone. This district is extremely competitive to get a nomination. And so 70 people will try out for it, and we got to break it down to 40 to do interviews. And that's one of the first questions I ask is, why? Why do you want to go to the United States Military Academy? Oh, my dad wanted to do this, and then I want to, run for office later. But no, your why is I want to wear the cloth of my nation and serve my nation, which is a very young. We were at an event 2 weeks ago, and I was Corin, Cruz, Gill, Jasmine Crockett, all the Congress people. I don't know them all in the area. And it was at Southlake, Texas, which is a crazy Texas 6A school. Did a wonderful job, and I was on the panel, and I talked about it. I was like, "Look, we're going to hit our 250, and I'm here with the Joint Force. I'm Army. I was in full uniform. You had Air Force Commando, and you had a Marine who was, they brought everyone in, like how you could serve your nation. I said, this is our Joint Force. You know what our Joint Force was 250 years ago? Farmers, doctors, local people who worked in the civilian, commercial or political avenues, or teachers. They were the farmers that decided this whisper of America, of what it can be, right? Which is now the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democratic republic, with all kinds of warts and flaws, but there's nothing in the world that has accomplished what we have accomplished in such a short amount of time. And it can be gone. It can be gone very quickly. 250 years is a very important milestone for many nations. And you look at the history of the world, a lot of them can fall at this point. And I hope to God we just rallied to what founded us. But I tell people that was the Joint Force. They were like, the Minutemen, right? They joined and said, no, these inalienable truths, Declaration of Independence, and then our Constitution. And it took us 100 years to get to California, like I talked about. So we're still growing, but we're so young and fragile, but powerful.
Yes.
That's what I hope we don't forget, don't forget where we came from to become who we will be, 250 years from now. And shows like yours are one that are hopefully bringing people together, because we're always going to have, disagreements with whatever. But there's no doubt in my mind, not even remotely close, every single American in this country, I would say 95% we all agree with. Crazy. Like there's so many things that we agree with more than what we disagree with. And all we focus on right now is what we disagree with, which is ridiculous.
I completely agree with you. Look at that. 95% right in there. 99% I agree with you.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's such a dynamic of truth, right? And before we wrap it up today, I think that's going to be our thing that we wrap up with, is the dynamic of truth, right? Where we have this ability as a great nation to maintain the trajectory that we're on and or improve upon it. We talked about a lot of groups of people today that our nation has affected, or the development of what Minutemen were to what they are now, right? It's literally a missile system, I believe. And the way that we do things as a nation, we are in control as a people, right? That's the most cherishable thing I think we could focus in on is the fact that this is a democratic republic. We are in charge, but we have to take action. We have to engage. We have to push through that comfort zone, and we have to get out of our shells. We have to get to that point where we agreed upon it. Because you're right. Most people I talk to, in fact, just the other day, right? They asked me, "You do know you're calling the Democratic House Committee, right, of Veterans Affairs, all right?" And I go, "Yeah, I know." The kid was like, "Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because we get a lot of phone calls, and then as soon as they find that out, they don't want to work with us, they don't want to talk with us." And I'm like, "Listen, we don't have the opportunities anymore to turn face on the issues at the Veterans Affairs, the issues as a nation that we have within optics of the youth, the generations to come, and the generations still here. The transition for the baby boomers is coming, where if we don't have the necessary caregivers or the necessary medical systems, the retirements, the social securities, all of that, we are literally leading people to the slaughter, right? And I don't mean it lightly. I mean it in every grace of the word, where we are pushing people beyond the means of what our nation can handle. It comes down to a fiscal responsibility. It comes down to legal responsibility, where I'm very impassioned by your leadership and your qualities, because people have to become aware of what the laws are and why it's so important to abide by them all, right? I go back to the Bible. And usually people say, "Oh man, you're thumping." I've been a pastor for well over 11 years now. The one thing I always let people know is, look, you can make all the mistakes in the world, but if you don't understand the commandments, if you don't understand the laws, if you don't understand the why behind the reason why it says turn the other cheek, it's not get hit again. It's simply for you to understand that that's exactly your moment to take action. There's this passivity in the Christian culture and the American culture, where just because we're emotional at times, right? We shared tears today, guys. Like that's intense. There's this ability to literally become that next episode of what we do as a nation and who we are as a republic. Because when we understand that we have to own all those bits, all the emotions, all the hardships, all the warts and ugliness that we are and have become, we also have to accept the graces, the amazing developments like we were talking about for combat medicines, the medical in general, and get back to that theology or philosophy that says, what do we need to do now? How do we get into this moment here? How do we get present with those whom are, sadly enough, maybe we get them with the show. But if we get more and more gentlemen like yourselves, great leaders that are in these positions to share these amazing stories, especially directly with all these other gentlemen that we've reached out to, and the gentlemen, and in your world. And ladies, look, I noticed this. Ladies tend to take a step back and let people talk about their service. I want to know more. I want to know about the female engagement teams. I want to know about the caravan or
absolutely amazing. And I'll connect you with 10 of them. I mean,
absolutely.
They need to be on your show. Just an insane contribution they do to our nation. And, I don't know about the other branches, but the Army is the most diverse federal entity in the government. The Army is. I mean, it's insane on every ethnicity, socioeconomic. It's insane. It's like when Teddy Roosevelt's, I think, the best American that ever lived. I love George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, everyone else, but Teddy Roosevelt was such an amazing human. He's on Mount Rushmore. He's a governor. He was a police union. He's a Montana ranch. Medal of Honor winner from San Juan and Puerto Rico. Nobel Peace Prize for bringing peace to Russia-Japanese war. Just a father of 6 kids, whatever, lost his wife, lost his mother. His sons died in combat. And just amazing, amazing human. And he talks about being in the arena. It's easy to be a critic in the stands, but actually getting dust, sweat, blood on you like you did as a corpsman. That's what life is. That's what being American is being in the arena. And that's what he talks about. And I want to read everything I can about this amazing human that most people, bypass. They don't realize, what he did. And the number one thing that he said is, we are a nation of diversity, but the number one thing that we have to realize is we assimilate. We have to be an American first before we can be anybody else. And he's very religious too, but he was like, you can come, we'll take anybody. That's what our Statute of Liberty says. But when you're here, you have to be an American first. You have to understand why we were created as a nation, our founding principles, and you have to embody them. And then the world is the limit. You can do anything, because this country, it brings people out of nowhere into, greatness. Tim Cook was my second line manager at IBM when I started IBM Corporation in 1993. And then he now is CEO of Apple, and one of the most amazing humans I've ever worked for. Our next podcast, I will just tell you stuff I've learned from him. What he is, just amazing. And he wrote my recommendation letter to go to Duke. I went to Auburn later. He's an Auburn undergrad and Duke MBA. I went to Michigan State, then Duke, and then Auburn. But he's just amazing human. He probably couldn't put me out in a room now, 20 years later, but he's just amazing human. But he came out of a small town in Auburn, Alabama. Grew up as a gay man, which is very difficult in the South at the time. And look what he's accomplished in his life. And but he's a good person at heart. That's the number one thing. And he loves what he does. And how do you follow Steve Jobs and not fail? Right? Scully followed Steve Jobs and failed at Apple, and they brought Steve Jobs back. But this guy took it to a whole nother level. And we're going to do a podcast on him, because I could talk about him for hours.
We definitely got to do.
But I chose not to go work for him, because they offered me another job to go work for him in California in 1998. But I said no, because I wanted to stay in the military. When you join Apple at that point, it's their first meeting is Sunday night at 6 p.m. because their supplier is in China, and that's how they started. And you worked on every day and Saturday until noon. So your whole life. There's so many millionaires, but that's it. And I still had a desire to serve the military. So I said no to that opportunity, which probably cost me $10-20 million. Easily, if you add it up, right? But I'm okay. It worked out.
At least in just the shares, man.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. My best friend Casey McDowell did work there, and he offered me a job, and he's done amazing things. And and I'll tell you, that's the type of friends that you need too, because he never gave up on me. My wife never gave up on me. My daughter never gave up on me. When you're having trials in life, you need that person who's like, I don't care how bad you fucked up, I will never leave you. And he's one of them. And that's a whole nother podcast that we're going to talk about too.
Oh, absolutely.
You got to be that battle buddy that it will never, ever say no to a friend, even if they're so messed up. And I was. But
that's the beauty, man. That is the beauty. Being able to stand up when you can't. Having others be there to lift you up when you don't remember your own value. Right? Everybody suffers. And I think that's the trauma of intelligence that we don't want to, as a species, kind of accept and guide, right? Which is the more and more aware you are, the more and more horrors you have to carry around between these two ears of ours. And the longer we get this opportunity to clarify and communicate and share resources and opportunities and books, have these great conversations like we did today, be able to sit back and take it with grace, right? Elevating the community, elevating the space, elevating each other.
Yes.
To say, hey, I'm not good. Are you not good? No, I'm not good. All right, what can we do to make you good? Let's be honest. Sometimes drinking isn't the answer, but sometimes there is no answer. Okay. Sometimes you are in charge of creating that answer for yourself, for your family, for those around you, for those who look up to you. Maybe you don't realize you're the leader of who you're destined to become, like Theodore Roosevelt, one of my favorite people. okay, as well. When you look at the absolute, I want to say vision of these iconic Americans that we could go on and on about. Maybe we do a whole special, right, on the 250, right?
Let's
It
do
would
it.
be beautiful, right?
Hey, that would be good. Actually, let's pick 25 out of 250. And let's do and we both research it. And let's talk about the 25 Americans out of 250 years that we think dramatically changed our nation for the
Dude,
good.
that's beautiful. That's great. You heard it first here, folks. You got to make sure we stay up to that.
Let's start with Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah,
I've really researched him, but I'd love to talk about him. We need more Americans like him, and he had flaws, but
absolutely,
he was also put in positions of immense authority. His vice president and his president was assassinated. So he's immediately president at a very young age, right? But anyway, yeah, I would love to absolutely go through that with you.
That's perfect. And you know what? Let's go ahead and wrap it up with last words for the day. Before we leave today, I really want to leave our listeners out with a kind of a vision, an outlook of what you have going on and the company you keep.
It's about leadership development, and there's things I've experienced in life that, if three things help you, then absolutely. It's all about leadership. The Army has an acronym LDRSHIP: loyalty, duty, respect, selfish service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And we'll go through every one of them. We're going to do a whole nother episode on that, but a lot of it just is, basic things that you learned as a young person all the way through the end of your life. And, there's applications both from the corporate, I call it the company you keep, from corporate to combat, things I've learned on the front line of many combat or conflict deployments, to corporate. I've had a very successful corporate career, and thankful for the IBM Corporation and Verizon Corporation that helped me do my military, or not helped me, but supported me, also doing military and sporadic tours throughout those, 30 years. But a lot of it's just basic, it's pre-combat checks, surround yourself with people that are smarter, more talented than you, build your social network, make sure you take a knee when you need to. Sometimes no help is coming. You got to make a call, execute imperfect plans. General Patton talks about imperfect plan violently executed is better than a perfect plan never executed, which is you never, once the war starts and crazy happens, all the war plans go out the window, and you got to deal with the facts on the ground and the reality, and you got to roll with what you have, and you just got to trust your instinct, your training, your actions, and the people behind you. One of the best things I love under respect is ride for the brand. I love that in Texas. They have brands everywhere, but ride for the brand. So if you work for Verizon, be the best Verizon advocate that you can. You work for the Army, be the best soldier, and always advocate who is paying you, who is supporting you, who's in your corner. And I love that, ride for the brand regardless of who it is, and then, you got to take care of your troops, always be there. Leaders recon, leaders eat last. There's so many things we're going to talk about in the next podcast. And then the last one I'll leave with is, and the chaplain or pastor just talked about it. I have it under honor, and I have it right here. It's called serve a higher purpose, right? And you also have to bounce back. You have to be resilient. You're going to make mistakes, but your past does not dictate your future. So, bounce back, never leave a fallen comrade, and just keep. I tell people, there's a Bruce Springsteen song called "Further On Up the Road." I absolutely love it. And it was like, I don't tell people goodbye. I say, I'll see you further on up the road. Like, you're going to go through trials and tribulations, but just keep rucking, and I'll see you further on up the road.